Welcome back. I realized that in the last video, I didn't introduce myself or anything about what I do. So my name is Rachel. I am a subtle energy practitioner. That's kind of a name that I came up with myself because I mix different modalities into my practice. So craniosacral therapy, myofascial unwinding, energy work, wellness coaching. The majority of those practices focus on just really subtle, slight movements. And I've become really fascinated with those practices over the years. And the more training that I have done in them and just see what they are able to revive. Interesting that that's the word that's coming up, but what they're able to revive in people is amazing. There's so many people that step into that work and they're like, I don't really know why I'm here. I don't really know what this can do. And sessions are really gentle. They're pretty slow. And people are often very surprised at how much they notice or feel in a session from something that is so subtle. That is a little bit separate from, or it's just different from how I work with folks in my programs and online, but that's a bigger part of like my in-person work. So yeah, what I have been in the past few weeks since I created that first video is really leaning into a lot of trust. I have really just been asking God, divine, source, whatever word you use, to move through me and really trying to trust that what is coming up and through is what is meant to. And sometimes that is really uncomfortable. It's definitely vulnerable because it isn't always what I anticipated or planned for, but that is really going to be how I interact with these videos, especially, is what is at the forefront and what is coming through today. I may have kind of this general outline of things that I want to talk about or things that are just really alive in my practice. But ultimately, I'm going to trust and let things just kind of flow as I feel they are meant to. So if you follow me on Instagram, you will notice that I have been much more active than I have ever been on that platform, sharing a lot of intuitive movement examples and just really talking a lot about simple practices, connecting with the body, getting into the body, the breath. This is something that I talk to every single one of my clients about. And you might be thinking, I don't know what intuitive movement is. My question would be, have you even tried? I think that what comes up as I'm saying that is, I have always wanted to be able to like dance well. I never was in dance, right? And so it's not something that I trained for or like learned how to do. But I think of it almost in relationship with that. It feels like a very vulnerable thing to step into something, step into the body in that way. But what I want to just encourage you to do and remember is that nobody is watching. In my case, I'm very surprised that sharing some of this has not felt more vulnerable, but it is largely because there is purpose behind it. I am sharing these examples, these really small examples of intuitive movement, which I would think for myself would have a level of vulnerability because I am moving my body in front of a camera in unique ways, let's call it. I thought that would have kind of a greater charge for me or would feel a little bit more vulnerable, but because it has that purpose behind it, it just doesn't feel that way. And I want to continue to create that content and show it to you so that you can see the ways that it can work, the ways that it can look. It's just examples, but ultimately I want it to be something that becomes your own. And so what I mean when I say intuitive movement, I just mean moving in the way that it feels like your body wants to move. Oftentimes it is starting out lying flat on your back. Maybe you're slowly starting to rock your head side to side. Maybe you're starting to rock your hips. And then really all you're doing is allowing yourself to move into other patterns that the body wants to move into. If you lie there for a minute or several minutes and rock your head side to side, that's fine. Maybe the pace picks up a little bit, right? Thinking about what always comes up for me, especially in session when I'm working on someone and it feels as though there's an unwinding happening for them where their head wants to move that way, is how many times have you wanted to say no and you didn't? You know, it kind of becomes this very just like, with most people, it becomes a little bit more rapid, like this more vigorous movement of like, I held something that I really didn't want to hold, or I held something in that I didn't really want to hold in. So there's one example for you. Another way that you can start it is you can kind of start it on all fours. That's a lot of the ways that you've seen it in the videos that I've posted on Instagram, you know, where you might start out with some cat-cow, arching the back. You might start out rolling the hips, getting into the shoulders a little bit, pushing back into like a down dog position. I'm naming these as yoga poses. This isn't necessarily like, we're not moving into those positions to be in that position. I'm just, you know, giving you that as a point of like something that you might know. And then just kind of moving into the body in different ways. And I think that I feel the reason that I'm talking about this and trying to give you these examples and trying to encourage people to do it is because it is such a simple practice that makes a huge difference. And I think that probably the majority of the time when I recommend this to people, they don't do it. And they don't do it because it feels weird or vulnerable, or they feel like they don't know what they're doing. But the only way that you are going to get into a rhythm is if you try it. Any of the things that are connected to my work, things in life, right? This isn't just about this work. Things take practice. We have to, and I was just posting about this earlier today about we get into patterns and we don't do the thing that we know we need to do because we're stuck in a pattern. And there's physiological reasons that we don't act, right? We are wired for survival. Our brain and body says, I need to conserve energy. I know how to do it this way. I'm going to keep doing it this way. That's why you hear people talking about rewiring pathways. And this is the same thing that we're essentially trying to create with these different practices. When you're moving out of a way of being and into a new way of being, you have to practice that. So you have to start with these simple ways of getting into the body, and then you can build on that. The more that you do it, the more intuitive and easy it becomes. And the greatest benefit from it, this doesn't happen to me every time that I do one of these practices. Oftentimes what I find after I do an intuitive movement practice, we'll call it, usually what this looks like is I am trying to bring some creativity forth, or I'm finding myself just kind of like ruminating, maybe in a mood that I don't want to be in, and I know what I need to do. I pick one song and I move to that one song. That's it. And about 1 minute in, I find a complete change in how I feel, how I breathe, how connected I am to everything around me. And there is obviously tons of science behind this. We could nerd out for a very long time talking about the fascia and all of what that is connected to, responsible for holds, releases, etc. But I got all excited there. But what I find is when I move from that state of feeling stagnant, right? I've kind of moved beyond like feeling afraid of doing it or feeling any amount of fear or weirdness around it. On the other side of that is this feeling of freedom, and it's full body, right? I'm feeling that now throughout my body, but that is also influencing me in my mind and emotion. And something that happens on occasion is there can definitely be emotion that comes up. This is something that's really present in my in-person work. And this is just a lot of times when you are working with the fascia. I mean, surely you've seen there's videos all over the place of people getting a lot of this work done really intensely. That's not something that I'm suggesting, but I think that that's kind of people's reference of it, is like more of this like deep and intense fascial work, as there can be these emotional releases. I'm not trying to force that. I am trying to invite that. That's a lot of the tone that I take with my work in general. Is it is not about force, it is an invitation and an allowing. I think that that is just a much easier way to be in the world. There is so much that is coming at us all the time. There are a lot of things that are forced, and you know, it's just not how I necessarily want to show up, which is kind of taking me to just this. I was thinking about this earlier of how I don't want to get so in the way of like God's design and God's plan. And I think that that's just something that has been part of my nature for a long time. Not in every single thing that I do, but I think that it is really at part of my core. And so that's probably what drew me to this work to begin with, and really what drew me to work with these practices in the way that I do. So I think that that's all that I have for today. I would love to hear from you if you have incorporated some intuitive practice, intuitive movement practice into your daily life. I will probably at some point here do an example of this. I mean, you can obviously view my Instagram and you can see some really simple examples of what that can look like, but I will probably end up doing a little bit more guided version of this at some point. But until then, thank you for tuning in, and I will see you next time.